In this series, and exclusive to this channel, I'll be taking you through the evidence in full that Lucy Letby gave to the court during her 10 days on the witness stand. The purpose behind this series is to give you, the viewer, a full and factual understanding of the evidence presented to Lucy Letby during her original trial. What you'll hear next is Lucy Letby's cross-examination in court. This took place at Manchester Crown Court and was conducted by Nicholas Johnson, KC. We're going to start with Child J now. Just to remind you, she was born at the Countess on the 31st of October 2015. She was taken to Alderhay in Liverpool for surgery on November 1st. She returned to Chester on November 10th, and the incident about which we accuse you of trying to kill her happened on the 27th of November 2015. Okay? Yes. I just want to deal with what you say about Child J in your defence statement first of all. So here you start at paragraph 124 by saying you did nothing to harm Child J. You then say at 125 that the Countess of Chester NNU didn't appear to be capable of dealing with a baby with stomas. You had never seen a baby with stomas at the unit before Child J, and when she arrived, everyone was apprehensive. None of the nurses had recent experience of stomas. From what you could see, the doctors were equally unsure about stomas. You say that we were reliant on the parents telling us what to do. They had been told what to do by Alderhay. They were more proficient at changing the stomas than we were. You say I don't remember Child J being wrapped in a towel and covered in faeces, but if that happened, it would have been potentially dangerous for her. Then at paragraph 127, on the 27th of November, I was not the allocated nurse for Child J. However, both Mary Griffith and I went into nursery 4 at the same time, having heard the monitor sounding. No one was there. We noticed Child J's deterioration and seizure, and it was after that she was then moved to nursery 2. Then the final relevant paragraph is 130. I didn't decide to keep the handover sheet. It is something that had just remained in my pocket from the end of my shift. Then what? Found its way into the Morrison's bag? Is that right? No. How did it get? I put it there. You put it there. When? I don't know. Right. Can we start with tile 140, please? This is the handover to the shift on which you were working on the evening of the 26th into 27th of November. All right? Yes. We can see if we just scroll down, please, that Child J began the shift in nursery 4 with another child, both of whom were being looked after by the band 4 nurse Nicola Dennison. You had 2 children in nursery 3. Is that right? Yes. There were a couple of children being cared for by a nursery nurse in the transitional care unit. Then Mary Griffith and Caroline Oakley had a child each respectively in nursery 2. In nursery 1, Laura Eagles had 2 children. We also have 2 children for whom we can provide limited details, LW and DM. Yes. Are you suggesting that the staffing levels on this shift contributed to any of the incidents that befell Child J? No, it was a very busy shift, but I don't know exactly what happened to Child J. You're not suggesting it was the staffing levels? No. Are you suggesting that the incompetence of any doctor contributed to what happened to Child J? No. Any nurse? No. Any mistakes that you've been able to identify which contributed? No. Do you agree with Mary Griffith's evidence, her assessment of Child J, that she was a very nice baby, a joy to look after? Yes. Do you accept the evidence of the mother of Child J, that in the days just before the 27th of November, Child J was well? Yes. That she had progressed well? Yes. That she was about to go home within a day or 2? Yes. And that, as a matter of fact, corresponds with a text you sent to your friend Nurse A at tile 60, doesn't it? Can we put tile 60 up, please, Mr. Murphy? It's a text sent a few days earlier. I'll read the previous one. It just says, "How's Child J? Wish I wasn't off. Feel so freaking useless." You reply, She's good, I think, in full, doing well with feeds, hoping to get home soon. Is that right? Yes. So you gave us quite a lot of evidence about stomas. Do you remember that? Yes. And how the staff at Chester couldn't cope with the stomas? At times, yes, some of the staff couldn't cope with it. No. Well, let's deal with the time around her collapses on November 27th. Was there an issue of competence? In terms of her stoma care? Yes. Yes, I don't believe it was necessarily a role that the nursery nurses should have been undertaking. Right? And your grounds, please, your reasons for why the nursery nurses shouldn't have been undertaking. Well, it wasn't just mine. It was discussed amongst the nursing staff that, as nursing staff, we had very minimal experience, which would mean that the nursery nurses would have even less experience. Which particular staff are you saying had that discussion? I can't name names, but it was widely talked about on the unit. So well known, but you can't remember who was talking about it? No. You referred as part of your evidence in answer to questions from your own counsel to tile 46. I'd just like to put that up, please. You referred to this. Mina and I don't think it's right. And you were suggesting that that was something to do with the stomas. Is that right? I can't recall specifically without looking at the context. That's a fair comment. Let's go back to the previous text sent by Nurse E to you. Okay, yes. It's about the band 4s doing the refeeding of the stomas, yes. Yes. Do you remember the evidence of Nicola Dennison, who was the nurse looking after Child J on this shift? Not all details, no. It was given on the 14th of February this year. She was asked whether she had experience of stomas and Broviac lines, and she said, yes, I did. Yes. And she was asked the following question. Were you comfortable dealing with both of those features? She answered, yes, I was. Can I clarify, though, that we didn't do anything with the Broviac line. It was just present. That was cared for once a week on Friday, and that was dealt with by registered members of staff. Yes. So that was her evidence, and it was never suggested to Nicola Dennison, was it, that she in some way lacked competence or experience to deal with a stoma? I don't recall. I just know that in my time at the unit, Child J was the only baby I'd ever seen with a stoma. Within those present years, there was no other cases of stomas on the unit. But you went further than that, didn't you? On May 16th this year, in answer to questions from your own counsel. You were asked these questions. Is there a particular band that nursery nurses are at? You replied, they're a band 4. You were then asked a question, can they do intensive care? You replied, no they can't, nor high dependency. Then you were asked this question. So far as you understand, should they be involved in handling and recycling stoma bags if that is required? You replied, no. And particularly as nursing staff there were unfamiliar, nursery nurses would have been even more so unfamiliar than nursing staff. And then this question, is there any reason why you had a band 4 dealing with something that presented the problems that stoma bags did? You replied, I think the unit was very busy and we had to use staff where we could. Do you remember that exchange? Yes. Were you there suggesting that the reason for Nicola Dennison being put in charge of Child J was because in effect you were short-staffed? No, I wasn't referring to Nicola Dennison specifically. It was generally nursery nurses having Child J over this period of time. Well, let's not worry about the period of time overall. Let's deal with the time that she collapsed. Okay. Are you suggesting there was something wrong with Child J being looked after by a nursery nurse at the time she collapsed? No. Well, in the light of that answer, I just want to revisit something else you said then in answer to your own counsel. You were referred to tile 56, if we can just look at that. Let's do 55 first to give you the context. This is Nurse E to you. Apparently Arian said she would have been okay. Jenny's having Child J, but others would need to do recycling, etc., but she was one performing it. And then the next tile, please, you replied. I said, okay, that makes sense, but Jenny was actually doing it. Don't know when to stop, do they? Who didn't know when to stop? Sometimes I felt that the nursery nurses would undertake roles that they weren't experienced or trained enough in doing. You were complaining here, weren't you, that Jennifer Jones-Key was recycling the stoma? Yes. Yes? Yes. Do you remember your counsel saying this? Having read that tile together, we'll deal with all the ones that he dealt with to put this in context. Tile 57 next, please. This is Nurse E to you. Nope, Laura and Nurse B thought it was terrible. Then tile 58, you to Nurse E. Could you read this? It's shocking, really. They are willing to take the responsibility for things that they have no training or experience, etc. on. Don't think they appreciate the potential difficulties. So you were complaining again, weren't you, in your evidence in answer to your own counsel, that this nursery nurse shouldn't have been doing this job? Yes, I don't think it was fair to put that onto a nursery nurse, no. Do you remember this was then said to you by your counsel? Pausing there, should nursery nurses take on tasks for which they have no training or experience in the case of babies like this? Do you remember your answer? No. You said no, and you said it was potentially dangerous. That's what I believe, yes. So the impression you were giving to the court was, first of all, that Band 4s were not qualified to do this job. Is that right? Not to do their job, to handle stoma care. Yes, and that the hospital was knowingly cutting corners with care by assigning unqualified staff to deal with patients who should have had trained staff. Yes. Do you know what the guidelines are for stoma care? No. I'm going to show you. Can we put up the BAPM guidelines on the screen, please? These are the BAPM guidelines. Okay. I'm going to go straight to the point. But if you want to see the context, we can go back. Can we turn the page, please? And again, please. And again. Right. Definition of a special care baby. What does it say, please? Special care is provided for babies who require additional care delivered by the neonatal service, but do not require either intensive or high dependency care. Definition of special care. Any day where a baby does not fulfill the criteria for intensive or high dependency care and requires any of the following. And then we cut to care of stomas. She was a special care baby, child J, wasn't she? Yes. What category of nurses deal with special care babies? Nursery nurses, Band 4s. But I think you need to appreciate the context in that the unit itself was not familiar with stomas. Other nursery nurses in units, where they care for them a lot, yes, I think they could manage that. This nursery nurse was familiar with stomas, wasn't she? In her opinion, yes. Who are you to contradict her? Because I know that in the 4 years that I was on the unit, I'd never seen a stoma before, so she had not dealt with one in 4 years. How do you know? Well, I don't know 100%, but I certainly can't recall any other baby in that time having a stoma. I'm going to make a suggestion to you. That you were deliberately creating the impression with the jury that child J, the care provided to child J, was in some way deficient. Do you understand what I mean? Yes. Yes? I do think that. I don't think she had a high standard of care. Well, what was the deficiency then? Where did it come short? I don't feel anybody on that unit was overly confident and able to say, this is what we do with a stoma. We were asking the parents, there were people coming around checking what we were doing or learning from the experience. There was nobody there that clearly said, this is what we need to do for child J. The nurse who looked after her was sitting where you're sitting now. Yes. She said that she was confident and capable to do the job. Well, that's her assessment of herself. Why wasn't she challenged? I can't answer that. Do you accept the evidence of Dr. Gibbs that prior to arriving at the Countess on the 10th of November, child J had no respiratory problems? Yes. Do you accept that she was taking most of her feeds from a bottle by the time of her collapse? Yes. Let's go back to tile 140, please, just before we get to that. The BAPM guidelines were quoted repeatedly to Dr. Evans and Bowen when they gave evidence. Do you remember? Yes. Have you ever read them? Yes. Had you ever read that bit about stomas that I've just shown you? I can't recall specifically, no. Let's look at tile 140. In answer to questions from your counsel, you said, "This was a very busy shift and the doctors were present for quite a lot of the shift." Do you remember saying that? Yes. Let's look at how busy it was at the beginning. You were in nursery 3, weren't you? Yes. With 2 special care babies. I can't say what designation of care they were, but they were in nursery 3, yes. There was plenty of space in the intensive care and the high dependency, so plenty of space in both those, if either of your babies have been either intensive or high dependency. Yes. So can we take it that your 2 were special care? Yes. Child J and NW being looked after by Nicola Dennison in nursery 4. Yes. Vicky Blameyer with 2 children in transitional care. Yes. Laura Eagles with 2 in nursery 1. Yes. And your friend Mary Griffith and Caroline Oakley with 1 each in nursery 2. Yes. Together with 2 children whose location cannot be confirmed. Yes. You didn't like being in nursery 3, did you? No, I disagree. Were you upset that Laura Eagles was in nursery 1? No. Would you rather have been in nursery 1? No. Do you accept the evidence of Nicola Dennison that because child J and NW were due to go home, the policy was to leave them in the room in the dark at night as much as possible? Yes. You did have contact with child J on that shift though, didn't you, before she ever collapsed? I think so, from looking at the charts, yes. Yes. If we go to tile 149, please, it's also at tile 150, the same information. Do we see that you were, together with your friend Mary Griffith, giving sodium chloride oral supplements to child J? We would not have given them because oral supplements go in with the milk feed, but yes, Mary and I would have drawn them up, checked them and left them at the cot side with Nicola Dennison to put into the milk. Yes, I see. But we wouldn't have actually given those ourselves. I'm going to take things slightly out of order for reasons that will become clear. All right? So far as child J was concerned on this shift, there were 2 pairs of incidents. Do you remember? Yes. The first pair happened in nursery 4, and the second pair happened in nursery 2. Yes. Do you remember that? So the first 2 incidents were documented as having happened at 0440 and 0503. Okay. Are you with me so far? Yes. There were then incidents just either side of 0700 hours. Okay? So the first of those was at 0656. The second of those was at about 0724 or thereabouts. Yes. You remember all that? So just that you have the full picture before I start asking you questions about all this, can you go back to the neonatal review, please, and go to page 8? If you go right to the end of page 8, we have the population distribution at the end of the shift, right? Yes. Just to jog your memory, you'll see that child J, first of all, had moved at the beginning from nursery 4 to at the end nursery 2. Yes. But also there, on the right-hand box in the bottom right-hand corner of the page as we look at it on the screen, we have EC and FC, who were twins who had been born at home and were admitted as an emergency at 6:10 and 6:30 respectively. Yes. Just to jog everyone's memories, one of those children had a cleft palate. Do you remember that? Yes. Okay. So that's the bookends of the time parameters, if you like, of the population. In answer to questions from your own counsel, so far as the first pair of events in nursery 4 were concerned, you said that you had no memory at all of them. That's right. Having thought about it, was that answer accurate? Yes. Well, I want to give you every opportunity to review what you have said, all right? Do you remember that following the second of the first pair of incidents, child J was moved from nursery 4 to nursery 2? No, so from my memory, child J had a seizure in nursery 4, and that was then she was moved up, but that was my memory. You were involved in an incident in nursery 4, weren't you? Yes. And that happened either at 0440 or at 0503. I can't say without checking now. Well, that was the evidence, you see, that following those two incidents at 0440 and 0503, she was moved. Okay. So it would follow, wouldn't it, that if you have a memory of anything that happened in nursery 4, it must have been one of those incidents. Or I've been mistaken in my memory and it didn't happen in nursery 4. Well, let's start with those events. And so if we can go please to tile 161 of the sequence of events and keep open also the neonatal review. We see here Nicola Denison's note, don't we? Yes. This ties in actually with the information on the previous tile 160. This is Nicola Denison's handwriting, she told us. Do you remember? Yes. It records two events, one at 0440 and one at 0503. Are you with me so far? Yes. Okay, so two events in nursery 4. The reason I suggested to you that it was following that child J was transferred is what Dr. Verhees told us. Do you remember Dr. Verhees? Yes. The gentleman with a Northern Irish accent, I think? Yes. His notes are at tile 165 of the sequence, please. Not going to examine these notes in detail, but these record the desaturations and the investigations that Dr. Verhees undertook and asked for. Yes. With me so far? Yes. Now, with that time frame in mind, if we could look at the neonatal review, please. The first desaturation was at, if we look at line 77, 0440. Yes. We could see that between 0447, which is line 79 and 81, you were making a nursing note entry on a computer for the child LF who was in nursery 3. Yes. So in other words, the desaturation happened 7 minutes before you started to make the nursing note. Yes. And the second desaturation happened about 4 minutes after you made that note. Yes. And you have a memory because you have told us that you and Mary Griffith went into nursery 4. Yes, but child J was fitting at that point from my memory. It wasn't a desat, she was fitting. Well, at tile 177, we'll start at 175 actually to get the context. Nurse E at 0624 sent you a text. Good night? Do you remember that? Yes. And you replied at tile 177 at 0628. Could you read it for us, please? No, child J in 2, screened. Had profound DSATs and just got 32-week twins born at home, one with cleft lip, and only 5 staff. So it follows, doesn't it, that by 0628, as I suggested to you earlier, child J had been transferred to nursery 2. Yes. Otherwise, you'd be looking into the future, wouldn't you? Yes. That's precisely the language Dr. Verhees used, profound DSATs. Did you copy his language from the medical notes? No. Tile 165. Can we just go back, please? 2 profound DSATs. Do you see that at the beginning of his note? Yes. At the time you were sending that text to Nurse E, that's tile 177, the one we just looked at, I'm suggesting that you were in nursery 2 with child J. Okay. What do you say? I can't recall where I was when I was sending that message. We also see in tile 177 the reference to the twins, don't we? Yes. Who we have already established were admitted. If we're looking at the neonatal review at line 114, the first one at 610. Yes. The second at line 131 at 0630. Yes. As you say in that text at tile 177, only 5 staff. Yes. So it was all hands to the pump, wasn't it? Yes. For the twins. Yes. Yes. So resources in the neonatal unit at about 6 a.m. on November 27th would all have been concentrated in nursery 1. Do you agree? Not all efforts, but yes. A lot of it, yes. Yes. But you were not part of that effort, were you? I can't say from my memory, no. Well, you don't need to rely on your memory, because if we go to the text, we will see. The next one, please. This is bearing in mind first twin in at 6:10, second twin in at 6:30. You at 6:29 receiving a message from Nurse E saying, "Oh shit, 5 staff on today, you mean?" And you replied, "Yeah, 5 today." And you sent that at what time, please? 06:31. So you were not in nursery 1, were you? No. Just pausing there for a second, how many of the nursing staff would it have taken to look after 2 babies that were already in nursery 1, and these additional 2 who were an emergency admission? Ideally, they would have all been 1-to-1. Yes. So can we say at least 3? No, because that wouldn't have been manageable. We didn't have the staff for that, and I think Laura had 2 babies in nursery 1 to start with. Yes, absolutely. So Laura had 2 to start with, and the other qualified staff were Mary Griffith, Caroline Oakley, and you. Yes. The children in nurseries 3 and 4 were special care? Yes. There were 2 nursery nurses working that night, Nicola Dennison and Vicky Blameyer. Yes. And they could have looked after the kids in nurseries 3 and 4. Potentially, yes. Yes. And so if each of the twins who admitted as an emergency had a nurse each, that would leave only you left of the qualified staff to look after the children in nursery 2, including child J, wouldn't it? No, because Mary wasn't intensive care trained, so she wouldn't have been able to go into nursery 1. It would have been me if there was a 3rd member in 1. We know you weren't there though, don't we? No, well, yes. So yes, but Mary wouldn't have been in there either. We know you weren't there because you were texting your mate, weren't you? Yes. If we carry on, we will see what I'm talking about. So this is a message sent by you to Nurse E at 06:31. Tile 180 next, please. She says within the same minute, "We closed again." And then at 06:40, tile 185, "Jesus, this will be an interesting allocation then. Are we closed?" Then what did you say at tile 186? Yeah, closed, trying to get someone in. Cleft baby being tubed, I think. Let's just look at where you were at this point, okay? Let's go back to the neonatal review, please. Can we go to the bottom of page 4? This is just before your text conversation with your friend Nurse E started. So at 6:15, in other words, after child J had been moved to nursery 2, where were you? With baby FB. Yes. Nursery 2? Right. Well, do you agree? Yes. Let's look at where you were at 06:22 over the page, lines 122 and 123. With baby KB? Yes. Who was where, please? Nursery 2. Yes. So you were in nursery 2, weren't you? Yes. When the emergency was unfolding relating to the twins who had been admitted. Yes. There would have been lots of distractions, wouldn't there, with these 2 emergencies? I don't know what you're implying. I'm implying, I'll make it clear, that the medical staff would have been having their attentions focused on the twins. Do you agree? Yes. And that any nursing help that could be spared would also have been focused on those twins. If needed, yes. Yes, well, such was the emergency that Dr. Gibbs came in early, didn't he? Yes. Yes. So do you accept that a lot of help was needed? I can't say without looking at the twins specifically, but it would be normal practice to get a consultant in when we've just had 2 new admissions and we've only got a registrar, yes. So if there's any doubt about it, if we go back to the sequence of events, please, at tiles 181 and 182, there we see Dr. Gibbs' arrival, don't we, at 06:33 and 06:34. Yes, I believe he'd been in earlier in the night as well, I think. At 185, we had the message that we just saw from Nurse E about it being an interesting allocation, and then your response at 186, please. Would you read it? Yeah, closed, trying to get someone in. Cleft baby being tubed, I think. Yes. So you were keeping an eye on what was going on in nursery 1? I can't say I was keeping an eye, but I was aware that potentially the cleft baby's being tubed. Yes. She responded, "What a nightmare, what a bloody nightmare," and 187, and then, "Please tell me Elsa's not in charge today," at 188. Then you responded, "What?" at 189. "You are having twins until we can find someone." Yes. And then she asked you, "What, the one that's being vented?" And then you responded, "What, please?" They are holding off at Mo, and it's all a bit tits up. Then your text messaging stopped, didn't it? I can't say. I don't know. Well, it did. If we move on to the next tile, that's Nurse E to you at 1940650. Yes. And the next one, 195. Yes. 0652, her to you, but you were not responding. No. Because you were in nursery 2 sabotaging child J. Weren't you? No, I was not. No. Well, we know from Dr. Gibbs' note, if we go to it please, at 197, so it's 2 tiles on, the first desaturation was at 0656. Yes. In other words, 7 minutes after the last text you'd sent your mate Nurse E saying it's all a bit tits up. Yes. Just look at that half an hour between 6:28 and 6:56, which is the time of the first desaturation. Were you recorded as doing anything in that half hour? No. No. We know that you were texting your friend, Nurse E. Yes. And we know that you were in nursery 2 at line 123 at 0623. Yes. And we know from the records that the twins were, one had just been admitted and one was about to be admitted. Yes. So things were very busy, weren't they? Yes. But despite the fact these twins were posing an emergency, Dr. Gibbs' attentions were deflected to deal with child J, weren't they? Yes. If we just go back to his note, please. What we see in his distinctive writing is his record of the first desaturation to what he says are unrecordable levels at 0656 and 0724. Yes, don't we? Both associated with clenching of hands, stiff limbs, and on 2 occasions, eyes deviated to the left. Yes. Took 10 minutes to settle on the first occasion and 3 to 4 on the second occasion. This was your doing, wasn't it? No, it was not. This was a serious emergency for child J, wasn't it? Yes, it was. Yes. Yes. So serious that it diverted Dr. Gibbs from the emergency admissions. Yes. Happening to a baby in nursery 2, and you were in nursery 2. I don't know that I was there at that exact moment in time. You weren't anywhere else, were you? We can't say that. We don't know. Well, you were there. You tell us. I did not do anything to child J. I can't say where. I don't know if I was with child J at that time. Is that what you're referring to? Oh, I'm suggesting you were with child J because it was you who sabotaged her. No, I wasn't. No. And you took your opportunity when all the other resources of the NNU were concentrated on the 2 twins that had been admitted as an emergency. No. Do you remember Dr. Gibbs and Dr. Breary saying that there was no explanation for what had happened? Yes, to child J. Her blood sugars were normal. Yes, her electrolytes were normal. She had no bacterial infection. Do you remember? Yes. Her blood test was normal. Her brain scan, normal. X-ray, normal. No rise in CRP or white cell count. The only abnormal thing was you sabotaging her, wasn't it? No. Do you remember in your evidence you were taken to the following night shift, November 28th? I don't recall that, no. No? Well, I'll remind you. Tile 324, please. This was the following night, okay? Yes. This is your note? Yes. And it was pointed out to you that you had had child J on the following night shift and nothing had happened to her. Yes. Do you remember that? Yes. Was the implication that if you had done something to her the previous day, you would have done something on this shift, and because you didn't, it shows that you didn't do something the previous night? Sorry, can you rephrase that? Yes. Was the purpose of your answers to suggest that because nothing happened to child J on this shift, if you had been trying to do something to her on the previous shift, you would have done something on this one. I don't quite understand, but what I'm saying here is that I've looked after child J and nothing happened to her. Yes. There is a detail that you weren't pointed to, though. And I'd like to go to the original note that's behind that, please. It's in the bottom right-hand corner. You see there? Who else was on the unit that night with child J that nothing happened to her? Parents? Yes. Can we just go to your interviews, please, because there's one matter I'd like to ask you about. It's the second interview bundle, please. Interview bundle 2. Do you remember me asking you about being in nursery 2 before? Yes. If you read up from the bottom of the page, about 3 or 4 inches, there's a question. You were asked a question, so you weren't her designated nurse. Were you required to treat her, other than obviously from the 2 pages? And you say, from my memory, there's an occasion when child J was transferred into my nursery. Yes. And then you said, I'm not sure specifically on the date, but there was a date that she was down in nursery 4 and she was moved up into nursery 2. Yes. And that is your recollection of being in nursery 2 when these events were happening, isn't it? I don't understand. I'm suggesting that's you saying to the police that you were in nursery 2 when these events happened. Yes. Yes. And that was the truth, wasn't it? I don't know.